And let me get that started. And I am going to go ahead and introduce Councilmember Kassen. Councilmember, if you would like to take a few moments and welcome your district.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited that we get to do this with this wonderful technology that allows us all to be together, but being at home at the same time. And I hope people will really share exactly the things that are concerning them and, don't hold back. We really want to hear what's coming up for folks and see what we can do to resolve any issues. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much to members of the police department for taking the time to do this meeting.
Thank you, Councilmember Kassen. Chief?
Yes, well, welcome everyone to this meeting, District 3. I'm very excited to engage and hear your perspectives from your particular district. These are important meetings. And so I know I've only been technically on the job for 4 months. So this ongoing conversation with our community members is important as I start to construct the organization around the perspectives and needs of our community. So I just look forward to hearing your perspectives. What we're going to do is go through a few slides with some information. We're going to provide some data and some stats citywide. And then what we've done, we were fortunate to reach out to your district council member and hear some of the common themes throughout the district. And we're able to specialize this particular meeting specific to your district. So I'm sure there's other things that might come up, but we'll do our best to go through the slides and leave enough time to hear your questions and concerns, okay? So the next slide. Okay, so again, we're gonna go through the introduction. I'm gonna talk just a little bit about the chief transition plan and our goals, my goals for the department. And then we're going to provide some information on crime updates and then have an opportunity for some questions and answers. The next slide. Okay, you all might have seen this. I know I went over it briefly in my swearing in ceremony, but also we published this on our website and made it available for the media shortly after I took over as chief. So what I did is the benefit to me being A, an internal candidate, and then B, being named as the incoming chief so early in the process is I use that as an opportunity to listen to our community and to get perspective from our community. So this transition plan was developed with the community in mind. And what we heard, in addition to the information that we got from the Engage Fremont series of conversations back in 2020, is all of that is embedded in these 6 fundamental goals. And so we first want to enhance community relationships, trust, and police legitimacy. That's very important. I think we have a great reputation here at Fremont, and it's my job as a chief to even take that to the next level and make sure that we're being responsive and transparent to our community. We also want to assess organizational effectiveness and efficiency. We know that we only have a limited amount of resources, so deploying those resources in a very effective manner is very important as we move forward. We also wanted to conduct a comprehensive review of our policies and procedures. Why that's important? It relates to police legitimacy. We want to make sure our policies are within the category of best practice, and we are providing professional service to our community. We also wanted to provide, We also want to provide better staffing, professional development, training, and education. So what that is we only want to hire the best possible employees to serve this community. We owe that to this community. We want to have top level employees. We also want to invest in developing our employees so that they can provide that high level of service and then support our employees with training and education. The 5th goal is to increase internal communication, team building, and employee wellness. We know that proper communication, our employees understanding the mission, the goals of the department to serve the community is very important. And we also want to support our employees, ensuring that they are well. They are well financially, physically, and in all other aspects of their life to be able to serve effectively. And then we wanted to build City of Fremont partnerships and support city initiatives, which is important. We want to be a good partnership, knowing that there's a variety of services throughout the city that we can help deliver. The next slide. All right, so now we'll get into a little bit of the data. So it's important to understand that all the data is from 2021, unless otherwise noted. So here we go. So this is citywide information and data that has been collected. And the biggest concern for me right now is violent crime. Violent crime is one of our top priorities. It is our top priority. The goal is to investigate and reduce shootings and gun crimes that has impacted our city. We want to focus on quick apprehension to prevent additional incidents. And you know, we established a gun violence reduction team early in 2021, and we were fortunate to make about 20 arrests of some of our individuals that we knew was responsible for gun violence or was likely going to use a gun to commit violence in this community. So as you can see, what's of concern is that from 2017 to 2021, we had a dip in 2019, but we started to see a little bit of an increase as far as the number of firearm-related arrests that we experienced in the city. The number of shootings remained pretty constant, but you see in 2021, we had a significant spike. We went from 19 in 2020, and these are shooting incidents, to 41 in 2021, with over 62 arrests for firearms-related charges. So that is of concern, and that's what sparked me to make some adjustments and create a gun violence reduction team to help mitigate the impact that we experienced in the city. It's also important to note that you are seeing it on the news. This has been and continues to be an unfortunate trend throughout the region and throughout the state and throughout the nation. There's a lot of guns out there, and people are using those firearms. So we're trying to do what we can, working with our partner agencies to mitigate the impacts. Next slide. All right, so I should have said in the beginning and gave a disclaimer that I'm going to talk about statistics, and sometimes I'm going to talk about statistics in a way to say, hey, I'm going to use terms like relatively low, and we had a low rate in this particular crime. And that's not to minimize the significance of these criminal activities. I say that because when it comes to homicides, that means that someone lost their life. So if I say that, hey, we're remaining steady with our homicide rate, that's not discounting the unfortunate folks who lost their lives. I want our homicide rate to be 0. I don't want anybody to lose their life. We are a big city with over 230,000 people. We're the 4th largest in the Bay Area. And so comparatively speaking, our homicide rate is low. And again, I say the disclaimer that I want that number to be 0. So there were 3 individuals last year that lost their lives, unfortunately. We were able to solve all 3 of those homicides, which is great. So our clearance rate is very good. But as you can see, we're right over the last couple of years, we have 2 or 3 homicides each and every year, and that has remained the same. One thing that has increased over the last year has been our serious assaults or attempted homicides. So as you can see, in 2017, we were in the 70s. There was a slight uptick in 2020. And then in 2021, we're up to 108. And so that is, again, that's violence. That is our top priority right now. And we're trying to make some adjustments internally to try to mitigate those statistics. Next slide. All right, so here is a little bit of good news with robberies. So the key to our response with robberies is quick response through investigation and subsequent apprehension. So when there's a robbery, we devote resources to that particular incident. We want to apprehend those individuals swiftly. We also collaborate with outside agencies to share regional suspect information. We know that a majority or a lot of our criminals, especially when they come and commit robberies, don't necessarily live in this city. So they're coming in from the outside to commit these crimes. So it's important for us to have those relationships with our partner agencies throughout the region to effectively respond to these crimes. So it has been trending down, and you can see from 2018 when we had a peak, it trended down and has continued to trend down into the 140s for us in the city. So that's a little bit of good news there for the city, that robberies are starting to trend down. The next slide. Okay, now property crimes overall. Our strategy here is to have high visibility patrols as deterrents in identified hotspots. So if there's, we have our crime analysis manager here, and they do a wonderful job. She has a team in which I get weekly briefs on trends and crimes that are impacting our communities. And because we have such an effective staff, we're able to devote resources to those areas that we feel are quote unquote hotspots in order to mitigate or impact or reduce the impact that it has to a particular community. We can't be everywhere all the time, but we certainly are able to recognize when we need to deploy resources to particular areas. So with residential burglaries, you can see that we have been trending down since 2017. That is good news as well. So we're in 2017, we had 369, and we've trended down in 2021 to 261 residential burglaries. So that's a good thing. Commercial burglaries. This is where we've seen a little bit of a spike in 2020, and then it's remained steady but dipped a little bit in 2021. So commercial burglaries, we think that the large increase in commercial burglaries is directly tied to COVID, right? So when people started to work from home, it left the businesses exposed, and we know that these are crimes of opportunity. So these criminals knew that they did not have a lot of folks at these businesses, and we think that they took full advantage of that. So on to vehicle break-ins. You can see that we've been trending down with that as well. So, we were at a high of 1,732, and now we've trended down to about 1,100 last year. The next slide. All right, so vehicle theft. This is where we are starting to trend up a little bit, unfortunately. So we had a dip in 2019, and it started to rise in 2020, and then 21, we crept up a little bit more. So historically, these individuals are, many of them are repeat offenders. So a car thief is a car thief. So they're not just gonna steal one car and get caught. We know that with COVID, the courts and our lawmakers made some decisions in order to reduce the number of folks that were housed together in our jails. And so it really limited us having the ability to take some of these criminals into physical custody and take them to jail. So if they stole a vehicle in the morning and we caught up to that individual, we would have to issue them a citation and release them back into our communities. So they're free to go out and steal another car. And we have had a couple of situations in which that has actually been the case. So yeah, your frustration with that, we share that frustration, but we also have to follow the rules and the law as it relates to that. I'm hoping that will change significantly here in the coming months. We focus on technology as well. Technology is key. We are very fortunate to have support within our community that trust us to use technology in a very responsible way. Technology is a game changer. We're able to solve a lot of crimes because we have the use of cameras, and not only cameras that we own and operate, but also on a voluntary basis, we've asked you to share your data with us to help solve crimes. And that's been key to focus on recovering and apprehending auto thieves. So next slide. All right, so grand theft. Our strategy here is we think this is attributed to the trend of catalytic converter theft. So you all know, you've heard in the news that catalytic converter thefts are just crazy, out of control. It's not, isolated to Fremont. There are there's big money to be made in, stealing these catalytic converters and then selling them for their precious metals. So, we have about 67 of these thefts per month, and that has really driven up the grand theft totals. So although you can see that clear trend upward, we think that catalytic converter thefts has really driven the grand theft crime rate through the roof. So we continue to investigate and focus on secondhand dealers and recyclers. I know at the California Police Chiefs Association, we are going to be in support of some legislation to make it a little bit more difficult for these things to be sold. So right now you can go and you can sell these materials. There's not much accountability. There needs to be some requirement that you have to show ID or where you got this thing from and those type of things. So we know that that's still going to push people to the black market, but at least it's a start in the right direction. And then regional information sharing. Like I said, a lot of these folks are coming in from the outside to conduct these crimes. And so it's imperative that we continue our partnerships throughout the region. Next slide. All right, and here we go with Sideshow Activities. So really didn't have that big of an issue in 2017. It started to creep up. 2020, there was a lot of Sideshow activity. And then it trended down a little bit. And I think that's because we started to crack down as a profession, united, realizing that it's not a Fremont or a Hayward or an Oakland issue. Oftentimes when a sideshow starts in Oakland, it will traverse, and I mean, they're vehicles, so they're very mobile. They will traverse south, whether on 880 or 680, and they will stop off at different jurisdictions. So they might land in Union City and do their thing in Union City for a while, and then come over to Fremont and then go down to San Jose. So having those partnerships and coming up with a task force, I think really has helped over the last year or so to mitigate this sideshow activity. So traffic and patrol teams deployed to key hotspots during peak hours of activity based on our analysis. And then we focus on regional information sharing once again to try to mitigate the impact. Next slide. All right, so I know that this is something that is of concern in this particular district with homelessness. And this is a citywide issue for sure. So we have about 9 homeless related calls per day for 2020 and 21. We have really stayed steady or even slightly trended down as far as the number of calls that we've had regarding homelessness. So we had a little bit of improvement from 2020 to 2021. But we've pretty much held steady. So there hasn't been a big spike or anything like that with homeless related calls for service. And I think that has a lot to do with our mobile evaluation team or MET unit. And in fact, we're trying to make some adjustments internally, knowing that, staffing is a challenge right now, but we want to kind of reorganize our organization to be a little bit more responsive to homeless calls and be able to get these folks the services that they need. Now, with mental illness, or what we call 5150s, you can see that those have trended down over the last few years as well. And that is directly linked to our MET unit. They do a wonderful job partnering with human services and providing follow-up to those that are suffering from mental illness. So yes, it used to be in the past that the police would get called out there. We had limited resources. We would just be interacting with this person. But now, because the MET team partners with clinicians, they actually have experts that can go out and support this individual that is suffering from mental illness and try to resolve those issues that way. So I do think MET has had a lot to do with that. Next slide. All right, now hate crimes. So it's important to understand that a hate crime is a crime against a person or group or property motivated by a victim's real or perceived or protected social group, disability, gender, nationality, those type of things. Hate crimes are serious crimes that may result in imprisonment or jail time. Now, it's very specific, and it's different to have a hate crime versus a hate incident. An incident is an action or behavior motivated by hate, but which for one or more reasons is not a crime. Name calling, insults, displaying hate material on your own property, posting hate material that does not result in property damage, distribution of materials with hate messages in public areas. Those are, unfortunately, are not crimes. Those are incidents. So although we will investigate it and make sure that it falls in one category or the other, if you called in a hate incident, we certainly will document it, but there's not going to be much we can do criminally to prosecute those type of situations. So you will see that the number of hate crimes that we reported did tick up last year by about 3. 3 were, we had 7 total, 3 were anti-religion and 4 were anti-race. So, although that is concerning, we don't think that this is necessarily a trend yet, because as you can see in 2018, we had 6, it trended down for a while, and then we had, it spiked up to 7 in 2021. So we're going to be monitoring this very closely. And if we do think that there is a trend, then we will partner with our outreach folks and other folks throughout the city to try to put out some messaging regarding hate crimes. Next slide. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is turn it over to Manager Candidate, who's going to talk about some data specific to your district, District 3. So what I talked about before was kind of general and overall within the city, but this is specific to your district now. And she compiled this information and data, and she's the best qualified person to talk about it. So with that, Joanna.
Thank you, Chief. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to address the crime in your area. So as the Chief said, this data is for all of 2021 compared to 2020. And so I'll just explain a few components here. That is a pretty standardized crime analysis heat map that you see. But just to note, the red does not necessarily indicate crime. Those are reports. So the red represents, a higher frequency of police reports, and that includes everything from missing persons to traffic calls, and just a number of reports there. And so the District 3 hotspots, as you might imagine, they are the very high density commercial areas. So the corridor of Mowry-Farwell, the retail area of and of course, that would include the Fremont Hub. So moving on to the number, we had 1 homicide in your district. As the Chief indicated, it was solved and resolved through arrest. Your robberies have decreased 28%. Burglary has decreased. And
hey, Joanna?
Yes.
Can we see if Monica could possibly isolate the person disrupting the meeting?
Yes, I'm trying to remove everybody at that right now.
Thank you.
Okay.
I apologize, folks. We obviously have someone who wants to disrupt the meeting, and we're going to try to isolate that so we can get on. It's unfortunate that we have to have this type of stuff happen.
Can I just stop for 1 minute? Amy, can you stop sharing and try to reshare? It looks. Thank you. Okay, we will. I apologize about that, everybody.
Okay, I'll kind of restart. Just so I think it is just important to convey again, the red is all crime reports, or I'm sorry, all reports, not just crime. So we can move on to some of those stats. You are trending down. These 2021 comparisons, this is what we consider our priority crimes. Not, of course, that the others don't matter, but these are crime types that our various teams and our analytical group coordinate together to really try to come up with crime strategies to reduce these crimes. Some crimes are very difficult, for us to have an impact, but we certainly can focus on burglaries, violent crime, et cetera. And so that's what we're doing with various crime strategies. So again, as the chief said, grand theft has had a significant increase. Grand theft is when your loss is valued at over $950. And so, a theft from your porch usually isn't that value, and that's considered a theft. But grand theft is definitely your catalytic converters. And of the total catalytic converters, the total grand thefts, you had 135 of those were due to catalytic converter theft. Yes, thank you. So calls for service. Calls for service, it includes emergency calls to 911, non-emergency calls. Some people call in just to report an abandoned car or a stray dog. And then it also includes our self-initiated activity. So proactive policing, traffic stops, just various calls that our officers respond to. Now, some callers are referred to our online reporting system, while other issues are deemed to be non-criminal and police don't even respond to that. That includes like private tows or wireless 911 disconnect calls. The police aren't responding to an assortment of calls. So moving forward somewhat blind, I will talk a little bit about the proactivity. So while I don't see the numbers, I do know that your proactivity has significantly increased. And this is a great thing. This is what we call our ILP, our intelligence-led policing strategies to reduce crime. It includes TSAT, which is our traffic response to traffic complaints. And again, that's a proactive measure. It's not necessarily aiming to issue tickets. It's to be present, to deter. And most of that TSAT activity is near your schools. Azaveda, Parkmont, there are several there. So that's a real positive, and that's used for prevention, deterrence, and apprehension. And then 415H, forgive me for jumping around. I'm trying to go by memory. 415H, these are disturbance calls that are homeless related. So when the chief explained the chart earlier, we did decrease slightly this year from last year. Some of you may have noticed what looked like a really large spike from 2018. And that's essentially because that is the year that we created this metric to evaluate these types of calls. So it didn't really go from 1,800 to 3,000. It's just we created an identifier for police response when we were having disturbances that typically, were business owners finding people in their doorway, trying to open up business, and people sleeping on their porch, or arguments, or, just different inappropriate behaviors in public. Okay, so.
I just want to comment. I did take a screenshot before it was taken down, and it's really amazing to see that in spite of the citywide somewhat
would that eliminate our unruly audience members?
We can definitely try.
Is there any way that we could make sure that people are muted or don't have the ability?
Sure.
Mute
Oh, yeah.
all. The
Oh,
host
okay.
is disabled screen sharing.
I'm trying to
Love you.
remove
I
people.
love you, Mom.
You might be able to change the settings so that people can't unmute. Great. So sorry, I was just saying that looking at the data that was shared, the only things that are up from 2020 to 2021 are auto theft and grand theft, which are up quite a bit, but everything else is actually declining. So that's exciting. District 3 seems to be in pretty good shape.
Yes, actually, you are right. And, these are the major crime categories. Also on the slide, I did, just for information, posted the top 10 reports. So while we've been discussing the priority crime types, your top 10 reports that is theft, grand theft, some of those crimes.
Amy, I don't know what else to do.
That's okay, Monica. Chief, if it's okay with you, I'll start. While they can't see the slide, there's not a lot to see, just to discuss some of the specific District 3 concerns. So
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks.
Councilmember Kassen, you had responded to our community engagement team with a few items on behalf of your group. So noise complaints, I think, is a concern. And so citywide last year, we had about 1,600 calls that came in to our dispatch center for noise complaints. In your district, you had 250. So that made up 15% of the city's noise complaints. This consisted of mostly parties, music, loud neighbors, fireworks, barking dogs. So while there were some repeat locations, they were all mostly private residences that range from 4 to 8, I believe. So, some repeat visits over last year to these homes. But fortunately, no major industries that create noise pollution every day for our neighbors. And then for homeless related calls, as we've touched on and explained how we capture that data, last year, we had just over 3,200 of these calls, and District 3 had 1,200. So that is 38% of the city, which is a good portion. Now, your district did decrease slightly in those calls, but you do have a fair portion citywide. Now, I think that's very easy to, I'm sorry, not easy to attribute, but I think it's understandable with the large commercial areas, BART, the hospital, the 2 hospitals, social services, city services. It is a draw for, many of this population. So I think that brings them in. And just to explain, our Housing Navigation Center, which one might easily attribute to this issue, in 2020 and 21. So for both years, there were only 7 crime reports taken there. There were 43 calls for service at that location, which seems very low. Now, there is plenty of activity in the complex at city services, at human services across the street. You know, there's activity, but I think that was actually surprisingly low to us. And then lastly, traffic laws and enforcement. So citywide, our proactive traffic enforcement was over 3,300 incidents or stops or time spent near the schools monitoring traffic. 1,700 of those were traffic stops. And we responded, or we received 173 complaints from the community. So that was citywide. In your district, there were 622 proactive incidents, 351 traffic stops, and we received 21 complaints for areas in your district. Your community members can file online, areas of concern requesting traffic complaints. Our primary enforcement has been between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m., school hours, commute hours, when they are in force. But I know that was a lot there and maybe hard to follow without screen prompts, but Chief, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you once again, Joanna, and again to Councilmember Kassen and all of the community members. I just, I can't say how disappointed I am that this meeting, which is meant to bring us together and share ideas and thoughts, has to be disrupted in this very way. So that's really all that I had for the group. We wanted to leave a little bit of time for questions and comments and those type of things for you all to kind of go through and hear your perspective. I know we have some questions in the chat that maybe Monica can help me navigate, and we can start by answering some of those. I'll take one that asks the question, what is better staffing? Hiring different expertise or more people? Well, both. So better staffing for me means to continue our commitment to diversifying our staff as much as we can. We know that if we have greater perspective and different perspectives, the better we are. And also, we know that there's a challenge in hiring law enforcement officers right now. So devoting resources to ensuring that we remain competitive and getting qualified folks in the door is very, very important. And then I think there was another question that had to do with the broken window theory, which is certainly something that we've looked at and studied and those type of things. And for those of you who don't know, the broken window theory is that if you allow a certain type of behavior in a certain area, like if a window's broken and you don't repair it, then that will just promote more type of different types of criminal activity in that particular area. So yeah, I mean, we try to do the best with what we have. We can't be everywhere all the time, and we work with our city partners, like we have volunteers that go around and they cover up graffiti. That's an example. So we don't have the staff to do that because it's just so much throughout 90 square miles, but we do rely on volunteers to go out and cover graffiti when it pops up. And then Monica, I'm looking for another question.
There's one right here that says, all of the intersection traffic cameras working in our district, at times it appears that the cameras go off in the middle of flow of traffic.
They go off like they don't work in the middle of traffic. Oh, maybe we're talking about the traffic and for the red light cameras, maybe, if that's what we're talking about. Yeah, so those are designed, they don't cover all directions at an intersection. It's typically one direction. And so what you might be witnessing is like a right turn in the direction that's being monitored, and that might trigger the camera. However, you know, there might be other traffic flowing in an area that has nothing to do with that violation that the camera picked up. So I think that addresses the question, hopefully.
And then I see another question here that says, suggested an approach for the growing trend of throwing bottles to shatter in handicap ramps. So is there any type of suggestions that you can make that we could potentially deter people from throwing bottles?
Well, that's one of the things that, you know, we're not going to be able to be there to see that all the time. So we really rely on our community members to help us with those type of things. Now, I would never suggest that you go and confront someone that has a bottle and doing those type of things, but you definitely need to report those type of things if it's vandalism or it's an intentional act to try to, you know, put shattered glass in handicap ramps and those type of things. Certainly give us a call so that if we do have resources, we'll go out there and investigate.
And that is all I see in the chat now. Does anybody else have any questions that they would like to? Okay, here's the one. Is there a correlation between domestic violence and homicides?
Well, our homicides, I don't believe, and Joanna, you can correct me, I don't believe we had a domestic violence related homicide last year. So we all know that domestic violence can lead to homicides. We know it's a very dangerous and volatile situation. And so we actually have specific domestic violence detectives who work on those particular crimes, knowing that intervention early on can often reduce injury and reduce harm to the victim of domestic violence. But I don't, it looks like we haven't had any domestic violence homicides, at least last year.
All right, here's another question. Has the city increased the budget so more officers can be hired?
Yeah, so we've actually grown our force over the last, say, decade or so. Believe it or not, we were down into that, I believe, the 170s just about, you know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and we've steadily grown the department little by little to now we have 200 officers. So there is going to be a need to continue to grow the department as the city's needs and law enforcement needs continue to expand. The population continues to grow. And I know that that is one of the things that the city manager has talked about. So we're in the middle of trying to strategize how that growth might look over the next couple of years.
And then I see another one here about 4th of July fireworks and that it happens regularly in District 3. Do you have any feedback on that?
Yes, so this year we are going to step up our enforcement of firework complaints. You know, it is a difficult violation to enforce. If you just walk outside of your house on 4th of July, you can hear all of the fireworks that are going off, right? And so we put out officers on overtime. We work with our fire department, but it is absolutely overwhelming. You know, you figure if we go and we either write a citation or even confiscate fireworks from one particular party, that's going to take 1 or 2 officers away from patrolling for probably 30 to 45 minutes while they dispose of the fireworks and those type of things. So even if we put out, say, 10 officers specific to fireworks enforcement, we'll do the best we can. In fact, we developed an application where the community can report firework complaints that will make us a little bit more efficient. But this year, we are going to step up patrols and have a little bit more presence out there and do a little bit more education to try to prevent some of these fireworks complaints.
Chief, before you move on from that topic, it actually happens quite frequently that we'll just be hanging out at home and we'll hear these loud explosions at all times of year. So what do you suggest people do when that happens?
Yeah, I do suggest you call, because sometimes, you know, my biggest fear, unfortunately, sometimes if someone believes it's fireworks and it's actually gunshots, right? And so I would like folks to call in and report what they're hearing and experiencing, especially if there's screams and those type of things. So that if we have officers available, we will send them out to investigate.
All right, here's one about video cameras. Video cameras must capture license plates and the perpetrator's face to be usable, right? They don't seem to care if they're on camera anymore.
Yes, that is correct. So if we have a red light violation, it must capture the license plate and it must capture the violation. So it's more than actually a photo, it's a video, so that we can tell when the light turned red and also the violation. So we still process those violations. We still have those go to the court. So yeah, I mean, there might be drivers out there that disregard public safety, but I still think it's an effective tool to help with traffic safety.
And then what does drug crime look like in District 3?
Yeah, I'm not sure we broke it out with drug related offenses. I'm not really sure that we would have to pull that data, and we can certainly maybe follow up with that. But it's important to understand that a lot of the laws have changed to make certain types of drugs either go from a felony to a misdemeanor or even an infraction, like, right? So marijuana in certain quantities is legal for recreational use, right? You still can't drive and smoke marijuana and those type of things and in public places, but it's just not, the penalties for certain type of drugs just aren't there anymore. So, we can certainly maybe follow up. Can you note that, Monica? Maybe we can follow up to see how many drug-related offenses we've had in District 3.
Right. What is being done to control the speed of traffic along Paseo Padre?
Yeah, so that is one of the areas that is routinely, we get routine complaints about that particular area. And I know that our traffic unit works that area quite often. So, there's other complaint areas throughout the city as well. Our traffic unit right now, we only have I believe five officers in our traffic unit. And so we will work that complaint area when we have the time to do so, to try to slow and calm traffic down. We also work with our public works director on these particular areas to see if they, from their perspective, they can have traffic calming strategies in order to slow traffic down in the natural environment so that it complements the enforcement efforts by the police department.
Right. There are a lot of cars with registration out of date. Why so many? Is it not worth stopping them?
Yeah, I mean, it's still an infraction to not have your car registered, for sure. We still do enforce those. So it might appear that there are a lot out there that aren't registered, but if it's not registered, we can and do take enforcement action on those type of situations. The thing about it as well is we have to prioritize, right? So, an officer making that traffic stop, if we're going from call to call on a busy night, the officer may drive by that call and that car with the expired registration and not stop that vehicle because they know they have a prioritized call that they're going to go to or are about to go to in a different part of the city.
I don't see any other questions. I do see that Roberta has her hand raised. Roberta, I'm going to ask you to unmute if you would like to ask your question. Roberta, are you there?
Hi, yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my question was, I'm a manager on a property and would like to know if there's any information on cameras that we can install.
Yeah, and actually, I think Monica is probably the best person to describe. They actually have a program designed to come out and work with different property managers to discuss several options. So Monica, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Definitely. So we have a private video surveillance program. It's completely optional whether or not you want to participate in the program. There's a short form that you would be able to fill out, and it asks some basic questions as to how many cameras that you have, where they are located. And in return for that camera, we would offer you a sign and we would help post that up based on where you are located on your property. And that would be act as another deterrent. In return, as you register your camera, if there was a crime that happened on your property, detectives would have access to that list and be able to reach out in the event that they needed to get video surveillance during an investigation. If you would like more information about that, I will put my email and contact information in the chat, and you can go ahead and reach out to me. And we have a couple other video specialists that can also help assist you with getting some video surveillance.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments? This is helpful for me. It really is. The comments in the chat, the dialogue, because like I said, we're in the process of evaluating and conducting a needs assessment for our police department, in which I'm going to, make some decisions on how to best deploy our resources. What are the concerns of the community? And, hearing some of the things tonight really gives me a lot to think about.
Chris, did you have something you want to say?
I did. So I live across the street from a park in District 3, and it seems to me I've seen a real correlation between the police being busy and noise in the park, to the point where whenever I call when there's loud music playing in the park, you guys are always busy. And I do have a scanner, and sometimes I'm listening to the scanner. As soon as I hear something come across the scanner or I hear sirens go, the music starts playing. So are you guys looking into that?
So if I understand your question is a suggestion? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Another way, I think people in gangs are trying to get noise complaints called in when other crime is going on.
Well, we'll definitely look into that. We don't have any experience, or we certainly didn't key up on that aspect of it. So we'll note that down for sure and take a look at that. We haven't noticed, any type of relationship between the two, but I'll have Monica note that, and that'll be some follow-up for me to do a little bit later.
Okay, I see another question in the chat. What is intended on Peralta Boulevard? There are numerous markings on the public right-of-way.
Yeah, I would have to go out and investigate. Are you markings on the roadway itself? Is that it? Or yeah, I would have to go out and investigate to try to figure it out. I'm not familiar with that particular area and the markings that you're referencing. I don't know if Councilmember, you have any insight into that?
I mean, if you want to send me an email, I just put my email address in the chat, jkassen@fremont.gov. I can look into it. I mean, there are a lot of improvements being made. We did just get a portion of Peralta relinquished by Caltrans, so the city took over, and we're working on improving it, because Caltrans didn't do a great job maintaining it, and the rest of that area of Fremont Boulevard and other parts of their former Route 84. So if you could send me an email with details of what exactly the markings are and where they're located, maybe even like a picture, I can look into it for you.
I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions, and I see some in the chat here. Were there any stats shared on home invasion trends?
Yeah, we didn't have stats for this particular presentation, but Joanna, I don't know if you know offhand.
We had we had 31 robberies, which that is a part of, a 28% decrease from 2020. One of those robberies was a home invasion robbery.
Great, thank you. And then I think this will probably be our last question. Are insurance companies getting involved with crime reduction? I can imagine with car thefts up 50%, they are paying out heavily.
Sorry, I was on mute. Not to my knowledge. They definitely work with the individual. Like I think the insurance companies give like breaks if you have an alarm, a home alarm, and those type of things. an alarm on your car and locks and those type of things, but I'm not sure to what extent. I'm just going off of personal knowledge on working with my insurance company, which, you know, they always ask me if I have a home alarm and a vehicle alarm and those type of things, and there's some discounts available there.
Is there anybody else that has one last question? I believe we have one more. Anybody last thoughts?
I'll have a last thought. Have you guys thought of adding the Fremont fireworks show back to cut down on the noise of fireworks?
Adding the fireworks like in the park back to
Yeah.
allow people to go. Is that the suggestion?
Central Park used to have a big show.
Yeah, we understood. Yeah, I understand. I actually, as a young officer, used to work that event. I don't think it's going to solve the issue. I really don't. I actually think that we would have people in the park, but we would still have illegal fireworks that would be displayed throughout the city. But we can certainly look into that. I just don't think that it would help with all the illegal fireworks that throughout the city. I sit in the dispatch center sometimes on 4th of July, and you would just see the calls come in. You can see when they pop in, and it's widespread throughout the entire city. I mean, we're talking about thousands upon thousands upon thousands of calls for service in just 2 or 3 hours. So something we can definitely talk through, but I really don't think it's going to make a huge impact.
Okay, I think that will be it for everybody tonight. Thank you everyone so much for joining us tonight. I truly apologize for everything that took place. I will put my contact information again in the chat if you want to reach out to me for some more questions and conversations and perhaps some more inquiries on some of the programs that we offer. Chief, if you have anything additional you would like to add in closing?
No, I just wanted to say thank you once again. This is very useful. Again, for me, I do take all of your comments seriously. We will debrief this. We will note all of these comments, and I will present this to my staff for options on how we can improve service or be more responsive. We're going to do the best we can with what we have. I expect a lot of the officers. That's because you guys expect a lot out of your police department, and that's okay by me. So hang in there. We are going to make some adjustments. You know, we're not going to be able to do everything in every situation, but we will certainly do the best we can with what we have. I do look forward to meeting in person at some point. Although I love these interactions over Zoom, I look forward to the day when I can shake someone's hand and really, you know, get a personal feel to having this type of engagement. So I thank you all once again, and I pray for your safety as you go about your daily lives. So thank you.
Thank you. And Chief Washington, I just want to say I so admire your grace as you were subjected to horrible, hateful speech. And I think people who attended who sent messages of support in the chat for the chief. It's so important that we all speak up against hate everywhere we see it. So thank you for those who did that, and please continue to do that in our community. Our community is a place of tolerance and compassion and inclusion. We don't always agree with each other, but we have to respect each other, no matter our race, religion, etc. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And again, feel free to reach out to me, jkassen@fremont.gov. I'm your council member. I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions or concerns. So thank you so much for everyone who joined from the community, as well as the wonderful members of the Fremont Police Department. I think we have probably one of the best police departments in the entire country. I hope people recognize that. There have been many police departments that have been doing, have been having a lot of problems and doing some things that are really not so good in their communities, and that hasn't been the case in Fremont. So thank you so much, everyone. And are there any final words that anyone would like to add before we sign off? All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining.